let's not pretend that we're not actually going to experience loneliness from time to time. And the first part of this is really understanding that, loneliness, like any other emotion or feeling, is something that we're going to wave through from time to time. And I love to use the word less after any emotion that I would like to experience less of, right? So one of the things that I tend to say a lot is, instead of saying, oh, I want to do something without fear, or I want to do something without feeling lonely, I kind of like to reframe it of, I would like to do something where I feel lonely less, less lonely, or, fear less. Because the truth
Uh-huh.
is that we are going to have all of these big emotions and feelings. And we have a couple of opportunities with that to, one, be able to meet that experience, that feeling, that emotion, and know that it's temporary, and it's how we care for it and how we tend it. And then also, what action steps can we do to also not exacerbate it, so we're not stuck in it and we find ourselves in the muck and the yuck, and then now identifying with that. So that's kind of the first part, is just to remind everyone that we are going to experience some uncomfortable emotions, and that's part of the journey in us beginning to learn how to take care of ourselves and tend to ourselves.
That's fabulous. I mean, just that word less, with less. We need to rename the group. So what I hear you say is like the without, like, let's just even take that. Like, how to single without loneliness, with less loneliness, really allowing the loneliness to be there, and know that it's not something that is scary, or it might be, maybe, but just knowing that it's going to be there and allowing it to have its place, and taking, would you say more like taking power over it, or just control, like having, managing it, I guess would be maybe, is
Yeah.
that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, managing could be a word. And also, I think how I sense it is, when I hear manage, I think control, which then
Mhm.
sometimes what it does is it puts a negative connotation to the feeling that we're having. And, as humans on this planet, we've been gifted with the range of emotion. And so being able to allow that any emotion has its time and its place is really what I find to be the liberating process of it, where it doesn't grip me and I don't have to control it. Usually, when we want to control something, then we actually hold on to it longer. But if we give it space to be and, uncomfortably welcome it, then
Mhm.
we have more space for it to let go and free and move on. Just like with all the good feelings, the happiness and the joy, those are also temporary feelings. They're going to come and they're going to go. So that's just kind of the first part that I wanted to address with this question, is that, to be really honest, is that yes, you are going to have moments of loneliness, and especially traveling, you're going to meet that. It's part of like that journey. I don't know if any of you saw, I'm sure you all have all seen the Eat, Pray, Love movie, where she experiences her range of emotions, and when you're particularly in a traveling situation where you're not in your comfort, you're going to come up against moments of feeling that. So the first part is like getting honest and saying welcoming a part of this loneliness.
I love that. Yes, and great knowing it's showing up.
Right. Right. And that we're not here to get rid of it, but we
Mhm.
can say, okay, how can we travel though and still have more engagement? So from this particular question, what I heard was, and I don't know your
Oops, we might have.
or where you want to go, but what I'm oh, is my connection. My internet's a little bit
Yeah, it
unstable.
just cut out right after you said with this question, and then it cut out just a little bit, just maybe a sentence.
Okay. So, from what I heard in the question was kind of that I'm alone at an airport, I'm alone in a restaurant, I'm alone at a hotel. And there's going to be moments that, yes, that you are going to be alone while you're traveling. But what I really recommend for people, and what I personally did as so let's see, I traveled for 3, 5, 6, 7 months after, like maybe close to a year after I got divorced. I decided I was going to go travel, and so I traveled for 7 months, mostly Asia. And and how I supported this trip, especially because my first country was India, and I was actually quite overwhelmed at the experience. I found a travel, or it was a travel group, but it was for a particular program I was interested in, and
Mhm.
a type of a topic that I was interested in. And so my topic was Tantra, and it's how it's led me to do all the things that I do now. But I found a teacher, and I found an interest, and I found a group that was going to that location. And so for me, that was really, really supportive, because I was actually in a part of my divorce journey where I was feeling terribly lonely, very scared. I felt like I had lost this masculine rock in my life. And and I also knew that I really wanted to travel, but I knew that it would feel like a lot if I didn't have some type of connection, at least for the first part of the journey. Um, and I'm not actually a really extroverted person. I'm actually quite introverted, and I'm not. It's not my skill set to just start asking random strangers questions and engaging. I tend to be that real quiet person in the corner, and if someone starts talking to me, then I'm really engaging. But otherwise, I can find myself being rather isolated when I don't know people, just like random strangers. I have a hard time getting to know. So for me, joining a group was a great way to connect and find intimacy with other participants, that leads to that trust and that connection, and then thus even lifelong friendship. So that would be one of my first suggestions, is think about like what you're interested in, and being able to, and maybe it's not something long like my trip, maybe you're just wanting to go somewhere for a week or 2 weeks or something, but perhaps see if there's something that you're interested in. Maybe it's cooking classes, or um, I don't know, scuba diving, or whatever you're interested in, and find out and see if maybe there's a led group, or even a class when you're on location. So maybe the first part of your trip, you do spend navigating the airport by yourself. You have a night alone in your first hotel traveling, but you have something to look forward to, so that you
Mhm.
feel like, oh, like I know I have something to look forward to. I'm going to have people that I meet. And when you're with people long enough, then you naturally start to create that level of connection and intimacy, versus meeting a stranger at a coffee shop and having a 20-minute conversation or something.
Yeah, and it just occurs to me, like, we live in such a beautiful time to be able to do this. Like, somebody, a single person 20 years ago even wouldn't have had the access that we do now. Like, even with meetups, or, just all the access through the connection we have with internet, and knowing that you can find those groups if you spend some time researching or asking people. But there really is so many opportunities. Like you said, get clear on what you want. Like, if you want it, if it's scuba diving or tantra, or if it's yoga, or crafting. I don't know. There's like such a wide variety of things. Whatever interests you, and then find some people that interests too.
Yes,
That's
absolutely. And
great.
then that way you can, especially, and then if you are someone that's wanting to do like a longer, female solo excursion, and you're having that desire, that you can mix it up by having those times that you're alone, and then, being able to have some things that you're interested in, to help kind of support. And then you might look forward to being alone after you've taken the course or the class. You're like, oh, I'm looking forward to having these few days by myself. I don't know, maybe.
Yes, I think that's so true. Like, it makes that almost the what's that word? It's like a supply demand, it's like when you don't have all this alone time, then the alone time gets a little bit more valuable. And they're like, wow, I like doing some things alone, because then I can call the shots and I don't have to follow a group. Or
Yeah.
be on somebody else's schedule.
Yes. Yes. I was reading something that had shared the difference between solitude and loneliness. So solitude is something that you're looking forward to, you enjoy. And then if it moves into loneliness, it's no longer solitude. You've spent too much time, out of
Yeah.
that into that loneliness.
Oh, I
Mhm.
like that. Yes. So important. Wonderful.
Yeah. Gosh, and let's see. I had so many things going through my mind earlier around this topic to
I,
support. Um, let's see, what was the next? So one of
I
the
know.
other
And
things.
let me I'll read over because I think there were a couple parts. It was like going to eat. Let's see. So I got off my
Yeah.
computer. Um, I can find it very lonely and depressing sitting at the airport by myself, sitting at the hotel by myself, sitting in the restaurant alone. I don't think just talking to the waiter is enough. How do you deal with the isolation of being a single traveler?
Mhm. Yeah, great. So the other key point is, especially when it comes to like eating out, not that you can control this all the time, but there's so many um, places in the world where there's so many solo travelers now that there's a lot of like more community style restaurants, even coffee shops, work stations that are really designed for people just like you, that you're not the only one that's out there traveling alone, that there's so many of us that are out there traveling alone, and we are going to experience loneliness, but we're actually traveling alone so that we can also experience connection and freshness and new experiences and all this. So looking for places that kind of have um, that offering versus like going to like an all-inclusive resort or something is probably not what you want to do when you're alone. People are
Mhm.
usually going there as couples or families or people they already know. It's not usually, unless it's like maybe it's a singles based or something,
Yeah.
which if the case that would be another option. um Hostels, bed and breakfast. And hostels are not just for like the young traveler and are kind of junky places. So from my experience, I've experienced a range of hostels and really, really nice ones. And also ones that have had like a variety of accommodations. So there might be like more the, shared type of accommodation. And then in that same building, you had your private accommodation. And so you had kind of all these different levels, which attracted different age ranges of people and a variety of demographics. And so that was always fun for me because I'm not the person that's going to share in a bunkhouse. Like, nope, done that. I
Mhm.
went, I was 40 and I decided to solo travel. I was not going to travel like a backpacker style, even though I did wear a backpack the first time around and realized that was not what I was ever going to do again. So I definitely learned that. Um, but there were so many great places that you can go that really are offering this like multitude of experience depending on who you are, and these great work areas with cafes and everybody's from somewhere and they're all longing to get together and connect and meet each other, and that was a way you can find people are all going on the same tours, and then you find people and you're like, oh, I want to go on that tour, and they're like, come with us on this tour. And so a lot of it is really just being open to the invitation of what's available when you take the leap and the risk to go. And really acknowledging that your travel now as a solo person is going to be very different than when you perhaps traveled with a partner, if that's the case. And so reframing that mindset, that it's not just going to be you and somebody, it's actually going to be you and who knows, maybe so many more cool people.
That's big, is that reframe and having that mindset of we can catch ourselves, especially if it's like really fresh, like you did right after your divorce, maybe the first time you'd ever traveled since your divorce, and then it's alone and it's 6 months away. But really framing that or reframing it as catching yourself when you keep comparing, like, oh, this was where Jack and I went, or Jack and I would be doing this, or just like catching those memories in your head and reframing them, knowing this is an entirely different time away or time. That's important just to
Yeah.
catch those reframes are so valuable.
Exactly. Yes. And steering away from anything that would evoke that experience of like a couple. So why put yourself through something that makes you more uncomfortable? The one thing we don't, what I'm a huge advocate of, is not reminding ourselves of our, in the negative way, of being single, right? So being around a lot of couples and you're single is not a great way to support your your energy, your nervous system. Don't do that. Go have fun. Go where single people are, go where people are, not in that. So restaurants, I wouldn't go to a fancy restaurant probably by myself. I would pick something that's more attuned to where I'm at now. And I might still have to, eat alone, but it's not, fancy restaurant. Like I said, the fancy resort or, some really romantic boutique hotel. I might not pick that.
Right. Something that's having, yeah, a special for couples or right.
Yeah.
Definitely allow yourself to be where you are or meet yourself where you are with that and know the value and the beauty in that. Because I mean, oftentimes I'll talk with women. Most of the women I would say I work with were more advocating their the end of their marriage than surprised by it. But then sometimes I will talk to women who were blindsided and weren't really planning for it. And so whatever the situation is, it's still an adjustment to know like this is a new chapter. And a reframe is so important to see the value in that and find how great it can be.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell a funny story of where I ended up somewhere romantic that was really depressing. So this was an accidental situation, but I actually the first travel I went for a month with a girlfriend of mine through the Middle East, and it was an amazing trip. But she was in a place of experiencing a lot of loneliness in her singledom, and I'm, maybe 6 months post-divorce, and we end up in this place called Cappadocia in Turkey. And it is like the romance haven of the world. A
Oh,
lot of people go there for their honeymoons. We didn't know this. We were kind of just touring around with a lot of information. And somehow our tour guide got us in like a lover's suite. And and somehow it was the one place we didn't have separate beds either. We had like one king suite. And at this moment in the trip, like 2 weeks in, we're starting to feel, or maybe 3 weeks in, a little nudge of traveling together of like, like, wow, we've been together a lot. Like, and we're like, how did we both end up on this trip in a king size suite in this romantic place? And not to mention, we also went on a hot air balloon ride, which was something my ex-husband and I always wanted to do, and we never got around to doing.
ah. So like these tips, like listening to this conversation is so valuable. And then also knowing like this is truly going to save you guys the experiences. Like this comes from true experience of what you experienced. And it's like, okay, here's something to try to avoid. Although I know, like, I'm sure you learned a lot from it.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we found it so hysterical. We were just both laughing. We were like, how did we end up here together? And of course, so I can look back and it really be like a really funny experience now. But the emotions that I met on that trip and that journey were quite intense for sure. There was lots of reality checks that I was experiencing on that trip. But at any rate, point being, thinking about picking places where there's more community, there's more, people that are like you. And I think the other important part that was important for me was also to let go of any thoughts around that I was having. This is back to limiting beliefs, like we talked about last time. I really was like afraid of being 40 and looking 40, and like 40-year-olds don't travel. And like I had this story in my head that I was like trying to be something I'm not, and I was going to be with really young people all the time. And that took a lot of work to like reframe that, and also to really recognize and witness that that wasn't a true story. That granted, there are a lot of people who are young and fresh out of, high school or college, and they're traveling There's also a lot of people from all different generations, all the way up. I mean, I met people in their 70s who were like, this is the first time I've been here and doing their thing, you know? And so a lot of that was reminding myself that it's never too late. You're never too old, you know, whatever story you have, you're to this, to that. Um,
Mhm.
Go live your dreams.
I love that. It is another reframe. I had a moment like that. I was in Paris, and it was like one of those things. I went with my sister invited me to go with her family. It was 7 or 8 years ago, and I ended up having 3 or 4 nights after they all left on my own. And talk about like being in like this most romantic city. And I wanted to just eat dinner in a cafe alone, but I had felt like headed out that night, like, oh, I'm going to look so pathetic. I'm going to look, lonely and like this old, like old woman sitting alone. And I caught myself saying that. I'm like, this is ridiculous. What a beautiful night. I have such an opportunity here. And as I'm walking down the street, I see a woman about my age sitting in a cafe looking like having a wonderful like meal, this glass of wine. I thought she was like badass. I love that woman. Like I just had this moment where I needed the reference and I saw her. I'm like, I have no like I'll look like that. That's great. So kind of also like collecting those references are so important because I'm sure there were some other women that were at their table that like, somewhere I could have found a reference to back up my belief that this was pathetic. I could have found that person, but instead I went out and I didn't even like intentionally do this, but it came to me to see a good reference and collecting, just like that meditation trick where it's like go out and look for a lot of blue things and then you find a lot of blue things. But it's so important to have that reframe. And
Yes.
if what you want is to travel, then it's going to take the intention of finding those because they're out there. Like you said, like you met these 70-year-old people who were having a life, having the time of their life.
Yeah,
I love
exactly.
that.
Exactly. Yeah, and noticing that, in even in the midst of the reframe, there were, God, I mean, my God, so many moments of really dealing with the emotional turmoil that was coming up for me, that was in the midst of having so much fun and exciting experiences and connections, and also really, also having to tend to that the feelings that were really true that were coming up
Mhm.
that really, now I can look back on throughout that big journey of like, wow, like you're saying, such an opportunity came from that experience to really meet some of these things in myself that who knows I could have been avoiding, or they're just or learning to trust myself deeper, trying new things. But also not from a pushy place. So, I think Hallie, you and I've talked about this before, is like, operating from the feminine. So I'm not really an advocate of operating from the masculine and putting yourself in situations and scenarios just to say you did it and to really push yourself into something that feels uncomfortable, but to rather look towards what feels nourishing, like what would feel good. Like, yeah, might this cause a little fear? Sure. But does it feel good? Or do I feel like, oh my gosh, I have to travel. And so I'm just going to put myself in all these really difficult, hard situations. And personally, I'm not really an advocate of that because I feel like, during this time, it's hard enough anyway, just to be with who we are
Mhm.
without putting ourselves in really intense situations that push ourselves. So, I'm always going to advocate to, that's why like being in a group or finding something that feels good so you can go towards the nourishment and the pleasure. So solo travel shouldn't have to feel all lonely and all isolating and all, negative.
And that proving energy or yeah, if you're not enjoying it. That reminded me, that's like when I did one time I took my kids on a spring break trip and then they went the next week with their dad. So I had one night alone. And it was right fresh after my divorce. And luckily it reminded me of the value of having somebody in your life like a coach or a therapist to be with you and give you those tools. Like you said, like not being in that proving energy or that masculine energy of force and I'm doing this. And I was in that, but I had luckily found my original coach and we had access to each other so I could reach out to her at any time, which is so valuable, especially during that early time. And I was trying to prove to myself that I could like sleep alone in this Airbnb. And it started getting dark, and I had like full on panic attack because I was just like, the first time I just felt like totally just abandoned, I guess, because my kids had been there. So moving forward, like just kind of fast forwarding with that story, it was so valuable to me to have Jill, my coach at the time, to reach out to and have her help me with develop some tools. And you know what I did in the end? We talked it through. She gave me some tools. I went through some exercises. I did some like journaling, and she helped me with that. And then at the end of the night, I ended up going to a hotel because I was like, I don't know what I'm trying to prove here, but I'm going to take care of Hallie, because at that time it was little Hallie. I mean, so often it is, but it was little Hallie. And it was my inner child that's where I was really healing. And that wasn't the best place for her that night. So I love that you said that, like having the community and having the awareness of like, is this my masculine shoulding myself, like I have to do this, or really listening to yourself. And if you don't have the tools, finding somebody who can help you with the tools, help you, support you, it is going to help so much to move through that and then get to that level to where it does feel good and it feels more natural. So I just, as you said that, I was having flashbacks from my experience. I'm like, it can get scary and lonely.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh.
Yeah.
And what that makes me think of also is that, when you're traveling, having uh, kind of a tribe that's going with you if you can. If you have friends back home and family back home that you can reach out to when you're traveling, because that will bring you closer to home. And so that if you're across the world, or maybe you're just in the next state over, or even maybe the next town over, who knows, maybe that's your travel experience, that you have something, an anchor point to be able to connect. And so if it's not a friend or family, then definitely, I mean, it's why we have coaches these days and therapists. And I had all those things during those time periods, because I did meet a lot of loneliness and a lot of fear. And definitely, as much as I probably tried to be nourishing, I was probably really naive at that time and probably was pushing myself into a lot of situations. and only in hindsight, I can see like, oh yeah, you really pushed yourself there. Maybe that's not what you wanted to do.
Right. I know. I look back on her. I'm like, she was trying so hard.
Yeah.
And thank goodness had the wisdom to reach out and get somebody with more guidance than she had at the time. It's really important to have those. I love how you called it an anchor, just having that anchor of
Yes.
somebody to help.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. Can you think of anything else to add? And I'll go back, everybody, and let me see if there's any comments, but I don't see what's. I'll go back and add just a few little highlights from the conversation. But hopefully, if you're watching after this is recorded, just let us know if you have any questions about it, because I know Wakenda checks the group, and I'll check the group too. But can you think of anything else you need that came to you that
Yeah.
to add on?
Yeah, one last thing that came to me that I just thought that really isn't maybe talked about or discussed, but especially when we're going through these times of healing, perhaps, let's say, but there's so many different apps to be able to meet
Mhm.
person of the opposite sex if you want to like have dates while you're traveling. And so, one of the things I was thinking about is that one of the reframes during your single time is that this might be the only time you're single till you're not. And single life, is a whole nother experience. And in relationship life is great. But there's a difference. And so, I was thinking about how beautiful that time can be. And especially if you're in different places in the world or somewhere new where you don't know anyone, and to be able to have a coffee date with somebody or a dinner date with somebody. So I know that people date over Tinder abroad. And one of the great things about long distance, or not long distance, travel dating, is that I had found is that there's a moment where you can be more present with the experience. with like
Mhm.
having a single date versus when we're dating, like at home, we're kind of like, oh, is this person going to turn into something? What's it going to be? This kind of stuff. And when you're traveling, you can have an opportunity just to meet somebody as they are, who they are for the moment. And so that could be something potentially that if you're open to, and it doesn't have to be anything big. It can just be like someone that you met for coffee, right? And,
Mhm.
an experience that made you feel safe, right? And at the end of the day, who knows? I mean, I'm always open for miracles. So you never know that you could also meet your your
Right.
your partner abroad. But really, I think also taking that into the reframe of the potentiality of what's coming your way, not where the fear of the isolation, the fear of loneliness, but actually the opportunity for connections, friends, maybe more.
That's fabulous because that is so often we, kind of sabotage ourselves going in with all these expectations. And so that does allow you to go in with the expectation of being in the moment, which is a great exercise and one to carry forward in all kinds of dating, whether you're doing it at home or abroad. And like you said, you never know, like allowing it to be open to a possibility.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that was I did a quick Google search just to like think about, what else like where you could find stuff, and I realized you can go on the internet and find so many groups, so many opportunities. You don't need either of us to tell you where to find those things, but at the end of the day, really, I think we're here to help support in what's possible in the mindset, in the reframe, in the meeting, the tender parts of you that you'll experience in this part of life, which is new and different. So,
Right. And like you said, allowing yourself to be in that feminine and listen to yourself and trust that, you're being kind with yourself and not trying to catch yourself if you're pushing, if you've bit off a bit more than you can chew at the time, or just kind of letting that guard down, I guess.
yeah, yes.
Yeah. This is great. Well, we'll be back next week. I don't see anybody like with a question, or hopefully I'm going to try to ping everybody because I don't think these are reaching everybody, or maybe we'll get some people on the replay. So definitely weigh in anytime, you have a question. Just make sure you tag one of us, and you can do that in the comments or send us a message. We're here, and we'll be back here next Tuesday. Be November. Oh, happy Halloween to everybody. Hope
Halloween.
you're Yeah, hope you're having a great Halloween. And but we will be back. And if you have questions you want to add, we would love to hear them. And like I said, if you feel, if you can give us more context, that's always valuable and helpful. So feel free to leave like a voice message on Messenger, or just whatever works best for you. You can just send me a message in Messenger on Facebook. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a
All
wonderful
right, listen.
day. Happy Halloween.
Thank you. All right. See you guys later.